He looked up, half-conscious, and saw the biggest of them, a Krell war drone tall as a tank descending through the smoke. Its cannons charged, humming with deadly energy. Ryan staggered to his feet. "You again," he muttered. Big and ugly as ever, he reached to his belt and pulled out the last grenade. His fingers were slick with blood, but he smiled through the pain. "Let's dance." The drone fired and the tunnel exploded with light. Ryan dove forward, rolling beneath the searing beam, and jammed the grenade into the creature's leg joint. The explosion tore through the tunnel, shaking the ground like thunder. When the dust cleared, the massive machine lay in pieces, but so did Ryan. He was thrown hard against a wall, his armor shattered, his body bleeding. He tried to stand but fell to one knee, coughing blood. He looked toward the shaft where the Queen's ship had gone. A faint smile touched his lips. "Told you, I'd cover your launch." The tunnel began to collapse. Rocks fell from above, sparks danced in the air, and the ground split beneath him. Ryan dragged himself to a corner, pulling out a small beacon from his pouch. It was an old human distress transmitter, barely functional, flickering with weak light. He pressed it once. A small blue signal blinked. Then everything went black. Hours later, far above the ruined palace, the Queen's ship reached the edge of Xerath's atmosphere. The AI announced, "Safe distance achieved. Course set for Royal Fleet rendezvous point." But the Queen didn't answer. She sat frozen, eyes fixed on the planet below. The sight was unbearable. Her home turned into a sea of fire. And somewhere beneath that fire, a single human had stood between her and death. When the Royal Fleet finally found her, the officers cheered. "Your Majesty, you're alive. We thought Xerath was lost." She didn't speak. She only looked down at the burning world, her expression blank. One of her generals approached. "Your Majesty, what of your guard? Who rescued you?" The Queen looked at him slowly. "Not a guard. A human." The general frowned. "A human? From Terra?" "Impossible," but she only turned away. "He saved me. Alone." When the war finally ended months later, the Queen ordered a full search of Xerath's ruins. Teams combed through the tunnels, scanning for human life signs. They found broken machines, twisted metal, and the remains of hundreds of soldiers, but no trace of Captain Ryan Hale. Only a small beacon was recovered from the rubble, burned but still pulsing faintly with blue light. The technicians brought it to her. "We found this near the palace tunnels, Your Majesty. It's of human design." She held it gently in her hands. The tiny device blinked weakly like a dying heartbeat. She pressed it to her chest and closed her eyes. "He fought so I could live," she whispered. "And now the stars are silent." That night, she stood alone on the observation deck of her flagship, watching Xerath from orbit. The flames had dimmed, but her heart still burned with guilt and sorrow. She whispered to the stars, "Ryan Hale, wherever you are, I will remember." Her golden eyes shimmered with tears. The soundless void answered her with silence. Far below, deep under the ruined tunnels, a faint blue light still blinked through the ash. The beacon hadn't died completely, and beside it, buried under stone and steel, a broken helmet lay still, its cracked visor reflecting the faint blue pulse. Inside, a human heart still beat, weak but alive. Captain Ryan Hale had kept his promise. He had stood his ground, but now he was lost to the galaxy. To the Queen and her people, he had vanished like a ghost. Yet somewhere, beneath the ashes of war, a new story was waiting to begin. 5 long years passed since the flames of war devoured Xerath Prime. The once golden world had turned into a graveyard of glass and ash. But slowly, through pain, tears, and stubborn will, it began to live again. At the center of the reborn city stood a shining new palace. It was not as tall as the old one, not as grand, but it was alive. Around it, markets grew, ships flew, and laughter returned to the streets. The people of Xerath had learned to smile again. Their queen, Lyrathene, ruled with quiet strength. Her voice was calm, her commands wise, her people loved her deeply. Yet behind her golden eyes, sorrow never left. It lived in her heart like a shadow she could never chase away. Every morning before dawn, she walked to the highest balcony of her palace. There she looked up at the stars, especially the small distant sun that humans called Terra's star, and she whispered one name, Ryan Hale. No one heard her. No one dared to ask. But the Queen remembered everything, the smoke, the fire, the man who stood between her and death, the last look he gave her before disappearing into the flames. The official record said he died in the tunnels of Zirath. The search teams found his armor, damaged beyond repair, and the remains of a broken beacon. But no body, no proof, only silence. And so to everyone else, Captain Ryan Hale became a ghost story, a legend. To the soldiers, he was the human who stood against the machines. To the children, he was the star warrior who saved the Queen. But to Lyrathena, he was more than that. He was the one she owed everything to. Her life, her crown, her people's future. The Queen rarely showed her emotions in public. To her council, she appeared cold, composed, untouchable. But when she was alone, her heart softened. Sometimes she would visit the memorial garden, built where the palace once stood. Thousands of glowing crystals marked the graves of those who died defending Zirath. Among them, one stood apart, a small crystal with no body beneath, engraved with words written by her own hand. To Captain Ryan Hale of Terra, the human who chose to stand. She often stood before it for hours, silently watching the crystal glow in the night. Some days, she imagined his voice low and steady saying, "Keep going, Your Majesty. Don't let it all be for nothing." And she would smile sadly, whispering back, "I'm trying. Ryan, I'm trying." The galaxy moved on. Trade routes reopened. Alliances were rebuilt. The Zirath Empire grew stronger under her reign. But in her private chambers, the Queen's dreams were haunted by the same image. A human in broken armor, walking through fire. Sometimes she dreamed he was alive. Other times she saw him fall, and every time she woke, she reached for the empty space beside her bed before remembering he was never there. Her advisors often suggested she take a consort, someone to share her throne, but she always refused. "I have no heart left to give," she would say softly, and though they didn't understand, none dared to question her again. On the 5th anniversary of the war's end, the Queen announced a celebration across the Empire. It was not a day of victory, it was a day of remembrance. The largest gathering in Zirath's history filled the capital streets. Songs were sung, lights were lit, and for the first time since the war, joy echoed through the city without fear. The Queen stood on the balcony, dressed in white ceremonial armor, her crown shining like starlight. Thousands below looked up to her with love and pride. She spoke clearly, her voice carried through the skies by amplifiers. "My people," she began. "5 years ago, our world burned. We lost everything, our homes, our families, our hope. But from those ashes, we rose again. We learned to stand. We learned to fight for tomorrow." The crowd cheered, but her tone softened. "And there was one who showed us how. One not of our blood, not of our world. A soldier from far away, a human who gave everything so that I might live. So that all of you might live." Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. "He is gone now, but his courage lives in every one of us. Let us never forget his name." She raised her hand to the sky. "Captain Ryan Hale of Terra." The crowd repeated the name. Once, then again, until it rolled like thunder through the capital. "Ryan Hale. Ryan Hale." For a moment, the Queen closed her eyes. The sound felt like an echo across the stars, like maybe somewhere out there he could hear it. Later that night, when the celebrations ended, the Queen returned to her private chambers. She removed her crown, set it gently aside, and stood by the window. The city below glowed with 1,000 lights. But above was the vast darkness of space, endless and cold. She whispered again, "Where are you, Ryan?" The stars, as always, stayed silent. But that night, for the first time in years, something different happened. Her communicator beeped softly. It was a signal from the outer rim. A small fleet had detected strange human transmissions in the debris fields near the abandoned war zones. Old human distress codes, repeating endlessly, almost like an echo lost in time. The Queen's heart skipped a beat. "Origin?" she demanded. "Unknown," replied her officer through the channel. "The signal is weak. Could be an old Terran probe, but the code is strange. It matches the signature from the beacon found in the palace. Tunnels 5 years ago." The Queen froze. Her claws tightened around the edge of the console. "Show me the coordinates." When the data appeared on the holographic map, she recognized the sector instantly. It was the same region where the Terran Defense Force once fought and vanished. Her voice came out as a whisper. "Ryan." The night sky of Zirath Prime burned like a dying star. Explosions lit up the horizon. and the proud crystal towers of the alien capital fell one after another. The ground shook beneath every blast, and the air smelled of smoke and fire. What was once a world of beauty had turned into a battlefield of death. Inside the grand palace, the Queen of Zirath, known as Lerathene, stood tall before the window of her throne room. Her scales shimmered like polished sapphire, her long crest of silver hair glowing faintly under the emergency lights. Her golden eyes reflected the fire consuming her city. Around her, guards in attendance lay fallen, the once proud defenders of the royal bloodline, now silent and still. The invaders had come without warning. They were machines, cold, merciless, built for extermination. The Zirathian armies had fought bravely, but their weapons were no match for the enemy's energy storms and mechanized drones. The war that began in the outer systems had finally reached the heart of the Empire. Lerathene clenched her claws around her ceremonial staff. Every echo of gunfire in the distance cut her heart deeper. She was not afraid to die, but she could not bear to watch her people perish for her name. Then, she heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, metallic, uneven. She turned quickly, expecting one of her guards or one of the enemy drones. Instead, through the smoke-filled hallway, came a figure she had never seen before. A strange creature. Tall. Human. He wore battered armor painted with symbols she did not know. His face was hidden behind a cracked helmet, glowing faintly blue from the display. His breathing was rough, his movement limping, yet his weapon, an old plasma rifle, was steady in his hands. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the hum of fire filled the silence. The Queen raised her weapon weakly. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking from exhaustion and anger. "Another enemy? Have you come to finish the bloodline?" The man coughed, then slowly lifted his hands, palms open in peace. His voice, muffled by the helmet, came through deep and tired. "No, Your Majesty. I'm not your enemy. I'm here to get you out." Lyra blinked, confused. "Out? You expect me to flee while my people burn?" He stepped closer. She saw the dark stains of blood across his armor, both human and alien. His voice was quiet but firm. "Running doesn't mean surrendering. It means surviving. You're their last hope. If you die here, Zirath dies with you." Something in his tone stopped her. It wasn't just his words, it was the way he said them. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a deep sense of duty. It reminded her of the old warriors of her kind, those who stood even when the stars fell. She lowered her weapon slightly. "And who are you, stranger?" He gave a short, tired laugh. "Captain Ryan Hale, Terran Defense Force. I was stationed with the outer colonies when your distress call went out. My unit didn't make it." "I did." The Queen looked at him, disbelief and wonder mixing in her eyes. She had heard of humans before, small, fragile creatures from a young world. Yet this one stood before her like a storm-given flesh. Another explosion tore through the upper floors, shaking the walls. Dust and fire rained down around them. The sound of mechanical claws echoed down the hallway. Ryan turned sharply. "No time for introductions. We have to move now." He grabbed her hand without asking and pulled her along the corridor. The Queen, though proud, did not resist. The moment their hands touched, she felt something strange. Warmth. His skin, through the suit, carried life. A fragile, fierce life. As they ran through the collapsing palace, enemy drones burst through walls and ceilings. Ryan moved with the instinct of a veteran. He shot them with quick, precise bursts, shielding her with his body each time sparks and plasma flashed. They reached the throne room doors, only to find a massive drone blocking the exit. A monstrous machine with claws like blades and eyes glowing red. Ryan shoved the Queen aside just as the creature fired a plasma beam. The blast struck his chest plate, throwing him across the room. His armor hissed and melted, but he pushed himself up, coughing. "Stay back," he shouted. The drone lunged forward, roaring in digital fury. Ryan aimed his rifle, but it sputtered. The charge was empty. Without thinking, he ran straight toward the monster. It swung, missing by inches as he climbed onto its back, ripping open metal panels with his bare hands. Sparks exploded, covering him in burns. He jammed a grenade into the open cavity, dropped down, and tackled the Queen to the ground. The explosion shook the entire chamber. Metal and fire rained from above. The machine collapsed, lifeless. Ryan lay on the floor beside her, chest heaving, smoke rising from his armor. The Queen stared at him, speechless. No one, Not even her own kind had ever risked so much for her life. She crawled closer, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder. Why? Why would you do this? You don't even know me. He turned his head slightly, his visor cracked, showing one weary blue eye. I don't need to know you, he said softly. You're someone who needed help. That's enough. For a moment, the Queen forgot the war outside. She looked at this wounded human, a stranger who stood between her and death, and felt something ancient stir within her heart, something she had not felt since before the war. Hope. He stood, groaning, and pointed toward a hidden door behind the throne. There's an escape tunnel. I found it on the map. We'll get you out. She nodded, her pride fading into gratitude. Together they descended into the dark tunnels beneath the palace. Every sound above reminded her that her world was dying, but this one man refused to let it die with her. When they reached the end of the tunnel, a small craft waited, old, barely functioning, but ready. Ryan opened the hatch, guiding her inside. She looked at him once more. What of you? I'll cover your launch, he said, checking his rifle. You're the key to rebuilding. I'm just the distraction. No, she said firmly, gripping his arm. You saved my life. You deserve to live. He smiled faintly, shaking his head. Someone has to make sure they don't follow you. And before she could protest, he closed the hatch. Through the small window, she saw him turn and face the tunnel entrance as red lights glowed in the dark. The enemy was coming, the engines ignited. The ship rose into the smoke. As it flew upward, the Queen pressed her hand to the glass, watching his fading figure below, standing alone, weapon in hand, surrounded by fire. She whispered, Human. What kind of creature are you? The ship burst through the clouds, leaving behind the burning city, and far below, Captain Ryan Hale made his final stand beneath a sky of fire, a single human against an army of machines. The tunnels beneath the palace trembled as fire roared above. The small escape craft carrying Queen Lyrathine shot through the underground shaft and burst out into the open night. Behind her, the city burned like a dying sun, lighting up the sky with orange fire and black smoke. Inside the craft, the Queen sat in silence, her claws trembling as she clutched the armrest. Her heart raced, but not because of the danger, because of the man she had left behind. Captain Ryan Hale. A human soldier from a distant world, one she had only heard about in trade whispers and old records. He had come from the chaos of battle, wounded and alone, yet he fought for her as if she were one of his own. Now, he was down there alone. Turn back, she whispered to the craft's AI, but the automated system ignored her. The ship was programmed to deliver her to safety at all costs. She slammed her fist against the console. He'll die, her voice echoed in the empty cabin. No one answered. Only the hum of the engines replied, soft and cruel. Tears formed at the edges of her golden eyes. She looked out through the small viewing port, watching the fading glow of the capital city. Please, survive, she whispered. Deep below the surface, Ryan Hale stood in the collapsing tunnel. His rifle hummed weakly, its energy core flashing red, almost empty. The air smelled of burnt metal and blood. His armor was cracked, one side of his helmet shattered, but he was still breathing. The Queen's escape ship had vanished through the shaft. He smiled faintly beneath his broken visor. Good, he muttered. At least she's safe. The ground shook. From the shadows ahead came the heavy stomps of the enemy. Mechanical soldiers of the Krell Dominion. Cold machines made for killing. Their glowing eyes pierced through the darkness like small red suns. Ryan took a deep breath and leaned against the tunnel wall. His hand trembled as he reloaded his last magazine. Come on then, he said to himself. Let's finish this. The first drone appeared, crawling along the ceiling. It spotted him and shrieked, a sound like tearing metal. Ryan raised his rifle and fired. Blue bolts of plasma ripped through the air, striking the machine square in its chest. Sparks exploded as it fell, twitching. More followed, 5, 10, 20. He counted each one, his rifle firing until it clicked empty. When his gun died, he switched to his combat knife, a simple steel blade, ancient compared to the machines around him. He lunged into the swarm. He moved like a ghost, dodging, slashing, stabbing into weak joints. His armor cracked with each hit, but he didn't stop. Every strike was fueled by one thought: protect the Queen. Even as blood dripped down his side, even when his lungs screamed for air, Ryan refused to fall. Not yet, he growled. Not till she's safe. A plasma bolt struck his shoulder, spinning him around. He crashed into a wall, vision blurring. His body screamed in pain. That night, she could not sleep. She paced her chamber restlessly, eyes fixed on the starlit horizon. The faint hope she had buried years ago began to rise again, fragile but bright. For 5 years she had ruled, rebuilt, endured, but always alone. And now, the universe whispered back a question she had long stopped asking. What if he's still alive? The next morning she summoned her fleet commanders. Prepare a ship, she said firmly. We're going to the Outer Rim, her advisors protested. Your Majesty, it's dangerous. That region is unstable. She turned to them with the calm strength of a queen, but her eyes burned with something deeper. 5 years ago, a human crossed half the galaxy to save my life. I will cross it now to find his. The council fell silent. None dared argue. As the queen stepped onto her ship, her heart beat faster than it had in years. The stars ahead seemed closer, brighter, almost alive. For the first time since the war, Lyrathine of Zirath allowed herself to hope. Because somewhere out there, maybe, just maybe, Captain Ryan Hale was waiting. The journey to the Outer Rim took almost 2 weeks. The Queen's ship, the Silver Dawn, moved quietly through the cold emptiness of space. The stars outside looked peaceful, but every officer on board could feel the tension in the air. Their queen was not traveling for diplomacy or inspection. She was chasing a ghost. From her private chamber, Queen Lyrathine watched the distant lights pass by. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but inside she was filled with a storm. 5 years had passed, and yet she could still remember his voice, his tired smile, his courage. Ryan Hale, she whispered softly. Every time she said his name, her heart ached. When they reached the coordinates, they found only debris. Old warships, human and alien, floated silently through the void, broken and lifeless. The wreckage stretched for miles like a graveyard made of steel. Scans picking up faint power readings, said the navigator. It's coming from an old Terran vessel. The Queen stood. Show me. The main screen flickered to life, showing a dark, half-destroyed ship drifting through the silence. It was a human frigate, its hull marked with the faded letters TDF Haven 9. Her heart skipped. That was the same ship mentioned in the reports 5 years ago, the one Ryan's squad had used during the Zirath evacuation. Life signs? She asked. None. Wait, the officer said, adjusting the sensors. There's something, a single biosign, faint but steady. Human. The Queen's breath caught in her throat. Prepare a boarding team. I'm going with them. The guards protested immediately. Your Majesty, it's too dangerous. She raised her hand. He came through fire to save me. I will walk through silence to find him. Her words left no room for argument. The boarding craft detached from the flagship and floated toward the wreck. The dead human ship loomed larger as they approached, its hull scarred and frozen. Inside, the corridors were dark and cold, filled with drifting ash and fragments of the past. The Queen moved slowly, her long robe trailing behind her, the beam of her wrist light cutting through the shadows. Her guards walked ahead, scanning for threats, but her focus was on the silence. It was heavy, thick, almost sacred. Every corner they turned, she expected to see him. Broken armor, an empty helmet, something. But all they found were empty halls and frozen airlocks. Then, at the end of the corridor, her guard stopped. Your Majesty, there's something here. Lyra walked forward. The light revealed a small chamber, once a med bay. The walls were cracked, the power weak, but one stasis pod was still running. Inside it lay a figure in damaged armor covered in frost. Her heart stopped. The chest plate still carried the same insignia, the old Terran eagle. The helmet was gone, showing a face pale from sleep, a short beard, and a scar across the cheek she remembered so clearly. It was him, Ryan Hale. For a long moment, she couldn't move. Her hands shook, her voice broke. It's him, she whispered. It's really him. The medic stepped forward. The pod systems are ancient. He's in cryosuspension. Vital signs are weak but stable. Somehow it kept him alive all these years. Can you wake him? She asked quickly. Yes, but slowly. If we rush it, it could kill him. The Queen nodded, never taking her eyes off the glass. Do it. The pod hissed as the thawing process began. Steam rose around the chamber. The sound of faint beeping filled the room, the first heartbeat she had heard from him in 5 years. As the ice melted away, Ryan's fingers twitched. His chest rose and fell, then with a faint gasp his eyes opened. For a moment he just breathed, his vision blurry. The light hurt his eyes. He tried to sit up but fell back, coughing weakly. "Easy," the medic said, supporting him. "You've been asleep a long time." Ryan blinked, confused. Where am I?" And then he heard a voice he thought he'd never hear again. Soft, melodic, trembling with emotion. "You're safe, Captain." He turned his head slowly. Standing beside the pod was a tall, graceful figure with silver hair and golden eyes. For a second he thought he was still dreaming. "Lyra?" he whispered. The Queen smiled faintly, her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, Ryan, it's me." He stared at her in disbelief. 5 years. "I thought I was dead." "So did I," she said softly. "But you refused to die, even in sleep." Later, he sat in the ship's medical bay, wrapped in a blanket, a warm light washing over him. The Queen sat across from him, never taking her eyes away. Ryan looked thinner, older, but his eyes still carried that familiar fire. He smiled weakly. "Guess I made it after all." The Queen laughed quietly, though her voice shook. "You always said someone had to stand. Even in death you refused to fall." He looked around the clean, advanced ship. "Your people, they made it." "Yes," she said proudly. "Zirath lives. Because of you." Ryan's expression softened. "No, because of you. I just gave you a few minutes to escape." They sat in silence for a while. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy with things unsaid. Then Ryan spoke, his tone low. "I didn't mean to disappear. The ship went down after the palace fell. I got caught in the blast, ended up adrift, found that old frigate. Stasis pod was broken, but I managed to fix it before I passed out. Didn't know it'd be 5 years." The Queen looked at him gently. "You fought for my people, and we forgot no one. Every child on Zirath knows your name." Ryan chuckled softly. "That's a lot of pressure." She smiled, then stood and walked closer. For a moment, the human and the alien stood face to face. Two souls who had crossed galaxies and death itself. "I searched for you," she whispered. "Every year I looked to the stars, hoping you were still out there." Ryan's voice grew softer. "And I kept dreaming I'd see your world shining again." Their eyes met, hers golden and bright, his blue and tired. In that single look, years of silence disappeared. When Ryan finally stood on the deck of the Silver Dawn, he looked out through the window. In the distance he saw Zirath Prime, no longer burning but glowing with life. Towers rebuilt, skies clear, cities full of light. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. The Queen stood beside him, her hand resting gently on the window frame. "It's home again." "Because of you," he turned to her. "Home for you, maybe." "I'm just a soldier," she shook her head. "No, Ryan, you're more than that." He smiled faintly, eyes still on the stars. "You really waited 5 years?" Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "A queen may rule her people, but even a queen can wait for the one who saved her soul." Ryan looked at her for a long time, speechless. Then finally he said, "Guess I took longer than planned." She smiled through tears. "You're late, Captain." And for the first time in 5 years, she laughed, a warm, bright sound that filled the ship. Ryan joined her, the sound echoing softly through the silent stars. After all those years, the human who saved the alien queen had returned. Not as a legend, not as a ghost, but as a man who had kept his promise. The world of Zirath Prime had changed. When Ryan Hale stepped out onto the balcony of the royal palace, the sight before him was breathtaking. Golden towers reached toward the clouds. Children played in open courtyards. Blue crystal rivers shimmered under 2 suns. 5 years ago, this place had been nothing but fire and ash. Now it was alive again. But for Ryan, peace felt strange. He had lived too long in silence and war. The sounds of laughter and life almost hurt his heart. Queen Lyra Thani stood beside him, her eyes glowing softly in the light. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said. Ryan nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's peaceful." She looked at him quietly. "You sound like a man who doesn't believe in peace." He smiled faintly. "I want to. I really do. But peace never stays for long." Her eyes softened. "You speak like someone who has seen too much." Ryan looked down at his hands. They were rough, scarred, trembling slightly. I've seen too much die. For a moment neither spoke. The wind carried the distant sound of music from the city below. Later that day, Lyra invited Ryan to the council hall. It was vast and shining, made of white stone and silver light. The alien ministers bowed respectfully as Ryan entered. They had all heard the stories, the human who stood against fire to save their queen. But Ryan could feel something else behind their polite smiles. Unease. He wasn't one of them. He was a reminder of war, of pain, of a time they all wanted to forget. As the meeting began, holographic maps lit the air, showing border systems and trade routes. But Ryan noticed one thing. The outer territories were marked in red. Those regions, he said quietly. They're under attack, aren't they? The room went silent. Finally, one counselor spoke. There have been raids. Small fleets striking colonies. We think it's pirates. Ryan crossed his arms. No, those patterns are too organized. That's not piracy, it's strategy. The council exchanged worried looks. Lyra studied him. You're certain? Ryan pointed to the map. They're cutting supply lines, slowly isolating your border worlds. It's a prelude to invasion. Silence filled the hall. After a moment, the queen dismissed the others. When the room emptied, she turned to him. You really think another war is coming? Ryan looked at the glowing map. War never stops, Lyra. It just sleeps until someone wakes it. That night, Ryan walked alone through the palace gardens. Soft blue light floated between the trees. Alien flowers opened as he passed, glowing faintly like stars. He sat beside a fountain and looked up at the night sky. The stars felt closer now, and yet he had never felt so far away. He closed his eyes, trying to forget the screams, the fire, the smell of burning metal. But the memories never left. 5 years in frozen sleep couldn't erase them. He heard footsteps. Lyra appeared, dressed in a flowing gown of silver silk. She looked at him with quiet concern. You don't sleep, she said gently. Habit, he replied. In war, sleep gets you killed. She sat beside him, her hands resting on her knees. For a long moment, they both watched the stars. You saved my people, she said softly. You gave me back my world. But who gave you back yours? Ryan looked down. There's nothing to go back to. Earth's gone. Her eyes widened slightly. Gone? He nodded slowly. Destroyed. During the last phase of the Terran War, when your people were fleeing, mine were dying. That's why I stayed behind, to make sure your ships escaped. Humanity had already lost. Lyra's voice trembled. I didn't know. He smiled weakly. Didn't want you to. You needed hope. Tears filled her golden eyes. You carried that pain alone? Ryan shrugged. Someone had to. For a moment, she reached for his hand but stopped herself. Ryan, you don't have to fight anymore. He looked at her, eyes tired but steady. Maybe not. But if another war is coming, someone has to make sure it ends before it starts. The next morning, reports began flooding in from the border systems. Entire colonies gone silent. Patrol ships missing. Refugee vessels appearing at jump gates, burned and broken. Ryan stood beside the command table, studying the holomap. They're moving fast. Whoever this is, they're testing your defenses. The Queen's generals looked uneasy. One of them, a tall alien named Varek, spoke sharply. We do not need human warriors telling us how to protect our people. Ryan turned slowly to him. His voice was calm but cold. If you'd been paying attention, your people wouldn't be dying right now. The general bristled. You dare? Enough, the Queen said firmly. Her tone silenced the room. She looked at Ryan. What would you suggest? Ryan pointed to the map again. You need to pull your fleets back here, fortify the inner systems. They'll strike next where you think you're safe. The council murmured nervously. Lyra studied his face and saw no fear, only certainty. Do you know who they are? She asked. Ryan's eyes darkened. No, but I've seen their tactics before. Someone out there remembers the Terran way of war. That evening, the palace was quiet again. Ryan stood at the balcony, staring out at the twin moons. Lyra joined him once more, her expression troubled. You brought warning, she said softly. And yet, after all you've done, my people still look at you with fear. Ryan smiled faintly. That's normal. Fear's the first step toward respect. She looked at him sadly. Do you regret saving me? He turned to her, his eyes gentle. Never. But the cost, your world, your people. He shook his head. If I hadn't saved you, they'd have died for nothing. At least this way, something good came out of it." Her voice broke. "You lost everything, and still you stand like nothing can break you." He smiled softly. "Everything breaks, Lyra. Some of us just take longer to fall apart." That night she couldn't sleep. She went to the palace observatory, where the stars shimmered above the glass dome. Ryan was already there, watching the skies with a soldier's stillness. "They're coming," he said quietly, not turning around. "Whoever they are, they'll be here soon." She walked closer. "How do you know?" "Because I can feel it," he said. "Every instinct I have tells me war's on the horizon." Lyra looked at him, her heart heavy with fear. "Then we'll face it together." Ryan finally turned, his blue eyes meeting hers. "You'd risk everything again?" She smiled faintly. "You once told me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing tall even when the world burns." "I learned that from you." Ryan said nothing. He only stared at her, this alien queen who had become the only light left in his dark world. As the stars glimmered above them, Ryan whispered quietly, almost to himself, "Then I'll stand again," and in that moment, the soldier who had died for peace found a reason to live once more. For the next few weeks, the palace grounds turned into a fortress. Ryan Hale stood under the twin suns, watching rows of Zirath soldiers train with new discipline. Their silver armor gleamed, their movements sharp and organized, but their eyes showed uncertainty. They were brave, but untested. He moved between the lines, correcting stances, adjusting grips, shouting commands in that strong human voice that echoed across the field. Again, "You don't move because you're told. You move because someone's life depends on it." The soldiers obeyed, though many still struggled to match his speed. Ryan didn't judge them. He knew what it was like to learn fear and courage at the same time. When the training ended, he stood alone, wiping sweat from his face. Queen Lyrathene watched from the balcony, her golden eyes following every move. Her guards approached her quietly. "Your Majesty," one said, "the human trains them too hard. They are not built for such pain." Lyra smiled faintly. "Pain teaches faster than comfort. If Ryan believes they can endure it, then they can." But inside her heart ached. She saw how much the war had left inside him, how every command, every strike was a memory he couldn't escape. That evening, she found him standing near the hangar, looking over the ships. His hands rested on an old Terran rifle he had rebuilt from spare parts. "You never stop working," she said softly. He turned, smiling slightly. "Can't afford to?" "The enemy won't wait." She walked closer. "You still think it's war?" He nodded. "I know it is. Those raids aren't random. They're probing attacks. Someone's testing your response time." "Who could it be?" Ryan's expression darkened. "Someone who knows human tactics. Someone who studied us. Or fought us." Lyra tilted her head. "But your people are gone." "Not all," Ryan said quietly. "Some ships went dark before Earth fell. Rogue fleets, mercenaries, people who didn't want peace. If they survived, they'd be desperate, angry. Maybe someone gave them power again." Lyra felt a chill. "Humans?" Ryan looked down. "Maybe. Or something worse." The next day, a small shuttle arrived from the outer rim. Its hull was scarred, its engines damaged. The pilot, a young Zirath scout, stumbled out, shouting, "They're coming! They've taken the Vega system." Ryan rushed forward. "Who?" "Who's attacking?" The scout's eyes were wide with terror. "Metal ships. Like old Terran design, but black, silent. And their leader." "He spoke your language." Ryan froze. His breath caught. "Human?" The scout nodded. "He called himself Admiral Kane." Ryan's face went pale. The name hit him like a bullet. Lyra stepped forward. "You know him?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "He was my commander." Before the fall of Earth, her eyes widened. "Then he—" "Yes," Ryan interrupted softly. "He survived." That night, Ryan stood alone on the palace balcony. The twin moons hung heavy in the sky. The city below glowed peacefully, unaware of the danger closing in. Lyra joined him quietly. She didn't speak at first, just stood beside him, her presence calm and warm. Finally, she said, "This Admiral Kane, what kind of man is he?" Ryan's eyes stayed on the horizon. "He was a soldier once, smart, ruthless. He believed humanity deserved to rule the stars. When the Terran Federation fell, he swore revenge on every species that fought us. And now he's coming for me," Lyra whispered. Ryan nodded slowly. "He won't stop until your world burns." She turned to him, her voice trembling. Then you must stop him. He looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. You're asking me to fight my own. I'm asking you to protect what you saved, she said gently. You taught my people to stand. Now you must stand with them. Ryan didn't answer. He looked up at the stars, and for a moment he saw Earth again, the blue planet that once was home. Then he saw the fire that destroyed it, the screams, the silence. Finally, he whispered, All right. Days turned into nights as the Zirath fleets prepared for war. Ryan helped design new battle formations, combining human tactics with Zirath technology. Soldiers trained harder. Engineers worked without rest. But even in all the movement, a quiet bond grew between Ryan and Lyra. She often brought him food when he forgot to eat. He sometimes stayed near her throne room, fixing armor pieces for the royal guards. Once, late at night, she found him asleep on a chair, the rifle across his lap. She placed a cloak over him, watching his face soften in rest. You carry too much, she whispered softly. Even heroes need to breathe. He stirred but didn't wake. A small smile touched his lips. For a moment, the queen allowed herself to reach out, her hand brushing his cheek. Then she pulled away, her heart heavy. For a ruler and a soldier, love was a dangerous thing. When dawn came, an alarm tore through the city. The defense shields shimmered as they activated. Ryan ran to the command deck, armor half-fastened. What's happening? He shouted. Enemy fleet detected, an officer replied. They're dropping out of warp near the moon. Ryan looked at the screen and froze. Hundreds of dark ships filled the void, sleek and deadly. They bore human design but carried alien markings, hybrid vessels built for war. Lyra entered the room, her robes flowing behind her. Is it him? Ryan nodded grimly. Admiral Kane, he's here. The comms crackled to life and a deep human voice filled the chamber. Ryan Hale. You always had a bad habit of siding with aliens. Ryan's chest tightened. Kane, you betrayed your species for them. You think they'll ever see you as one of their own? Lyra's eyes narrowed. We see him as more than that. Ah, the Queen, Kane said mockingly. The alien monarch who stole a soldier's heart. Fitting. When I burn your world, he'll finally see the truth. The transmission ended. Silence filled the room. Lyra looked at Ryan. He knows you. Ryan's expression was hard as stone. He knows how I think. Which means I know how he fights. He turned to the officers. Prepare every ship. Power the defense grid. He's coming for me, but he'll have to go through all of us first. As the fleet assembled, Ryan stood at the bridge window watching the enemy approach. The stars seemed dimmer now, the air heavier. Lyra came to his side. Ryan, she said quietly, when this begins, promise me something. He looked at her. Anything. Promise me you'll live, he smiled faintly. So that's a hard promise for a soldier. Her voice trembled. Then promise you'll try. He reached out, hesitating, then gently touched her hand. I will. They stood together, the Queen and the lost soldier, watching the darkness of war rise again. The alarms began to sound. The fleet engines roared, and as the stars turned red with the light of battle, Ryan whispered softly, Let's finish what we started. The sky above Zirath Prime burned red. The stars that had once shone peacefully were now swallowed by fire and smoke. Enemy ships, black and sharp like blades, filled the heavens. Explosions lit the darkness as two great fleets clashed above the twin moons. The war Ryan Hale had hoped would never return had come again. Ryan stood on the command bridge of the flagship Silver Dawn, his armor dented and scarred, his eyes cold with focus. Around him, alien officers shouted coordinates and damage reports. Shields at 60%, one called out. Enemy cruisers closing in from the west flank. Another shouted. Ryan leaned over the console. Hold formation. Don't break the line. If one ship falls, the rest will collapse with it. Through the windows, he could see the chaos outside. Dozens of Zirath ships were already in flames, but they fought fiercely. Their pilots, once untested, now moved with the confidence he had taught them. They weren't just soldiers anymore, they were warriors, and they were his responsibility. The Queen stood beside him, dressed not in royal robes but in light armor, her crown replaced by a battle helm. Even amid the alarms and chaos, her presence was calm, bright like the heart of a storm. Ryan turned to her. You should be in the command shelter. She shook her head firmly. I lead my people from the front. If they see me flee, they'll lose hope. Ryan almost smiled. Still stubborn as ever, she looked at him softly. I learned that from a human. A voice echoed through the comms. Ryan Hale. You can't hide behind aliens forever. Ryan froze. He knew that voice anywhere. Admiral Kane. Patch him through, Ryan said coldly. A holographic image appeared. An older human man. His face scarred, eyes hard as iron. His armor was black, marked with the Terran eagle twisted into a cruel shape. You were one of us once, Kane said. You bled for Earth, now look at you, serving the very creatures that destroyed it. Ryan's jaw tightened. You destroyed Earth yourself, Kane. You turned vengeance into madness. Madness? Kane growled. No, Hale, justice. Humanity was betrayed by the galaxy, and you betrayed humanity by saving her. His holographic image pointed at the Queen. Ryan stepped forward. You want revenge? You come through me. Kane's lips curled into a cruel smile. I was hoping you'd say that. The transmission ended. The battle began. The enemy ships moved in perfect formation, human tactics mixed with alien weapons. Ryan recognized the patterns immediately. He shouted commands to counter every move. Turn the main guns toward Grid 12. Cut off their flanking ships. Don't chase them, they're baiting you. The Zirath officers obeyed without hesitation. Under his command, the fleet began to push back, but the cost was high. Every explosion outside was another life lost. Through the chaos, Ryan's voice never shook. He was calm, steady, unbreakable. But when a nearby cruiser exploded, rocking the bridge, Lyra stumbled. Ryan caught her before she fell. Their eyes met. For a moment, the noise around them faded. You need to survive this, he said quietly. She shook her head. We both will. He looked away. Not both. Before she could answer, a massive blast struck the ship. The floor trembled. Sparks filled the air. Main engine hit, shouted an officer. We've lost power to the forward shields. Ryan's heart pounded. Without the shields, they were exposed. He turned toward the window and saw a massive enemy dreadnought approaching. At its front, he recognized the insignia. Kane's flagship. Lock on the enemy command ship, Ryan ordered. Sir, we can't win a head-on fight, the gunner protested. Ryan's eyes hardened. We're not here to win. We're here to end it. He turned to Lyra, his voice low. Get to the escape pod. That's an order. She stared at him in disbelief. No, Ryan, he stepped closer. You're a queen. Your people need you alive. I'll draw his fire. Tears filled her golden eyes. And what about you? He smiled faintly. I already died once. This time I get to choose why. Lyra grabbed his arm, her voice breaking. Don't do this, please. He gently placed his hand on her face. You once said even a queen can wait for the one who saved her soul. So wait for me, a little longer. Before she could speak, he turned and walked toward the hangar. Minutes later, a single fighter launched from the Silver Dawn, engines blazing like a falling star. Ryan gripped the controls. His eyes locked on Kane's dreadnought ahead. Through the comms, Kane's voice sneered. Running alone again, Hale? You never learn, Ryan smirked. You talk too much. He dove through the chaos, dodging enemy fire, weaving between explosions. His fighter took several hits, alarms blaring, but he pushed harder. His eyes were fierce, focused only on the target. Kane, he shouted. For Earth, for Zirath, for peace. He fired every missile, every gun, until his ship shook apart. The enemy shields shattered. The dreadnought's hull cracked, flames bursting across its surface. But Kane wasn't finished. His ship still turned its guns toward the Silver Dawn. Ryan's controls sparked. The fighter was breaking apart. He saw the Queen's ship in the distance, damaged but still fighting, and he made his choice. He diverted all remaining power to his engines, set his ship's trajectory straight into Kane's flagship, and whispered softly, "Let this be the last war." Then he closed his eyes and hit the thrusters. The impact was like a second sun in the sky. The explosion tore through the enemy fleet. The shockwave rippled across space, scattering ships like dust. Kane's dreadnought vanished in a blinding burst of light. From the palace below, the people of Zirath saw a star explode above their world and then fade into silence. When the light cleared, the dark fleet was gone, the war was over. Hours later, Queen Lyra stood on the deck of the Silver Dawn, staring at the empty space where the explosion had been. Her hands trembled. Her eyes glowed with tears she refused to let fall. "His signal?" she whispered. The officer lowered his head. "Gone, Your Majesty," she nodded slowly. "I see." The room fell silent. No one dared speak. Lyra walked to the window, the stars reflecting in her eyes. She spoke softly, more to herself than to anyone else. "He saved me twice, once from fire and once from despair." She placed her hand on the cold glass where the stars shimmered faintly. "You kept your promise, Ryan Hale," she whispered. "You stood again." Months later, a monument was built in the heart of Zirath's capital, a statue of a human soldier, head bowed, rifle across his chest. At his feet, the inscription read, "He stood when the stars fell. He fought when hope was gone. He saved our queen. And through her, he saved us all." Every year, on the day of his sacrifice, the queen stood before that statue. She never wore her crown on that day. She simply stood, her hands clasped, and whispered the same words to the silent sky. "Come back to me." And some nights, when the winds were still and the stars burned brighter than usual, a small streak of light would cross the sky, fast, quiet and fleeting, and the people would say, "The human still watches the queen he saved."